Funny situation.
In the south, refugees are becoming a major problem, with thousands of red soldiers and guerrillas in civilian clothes trying to escape to the north. Each refugee must be individually, time-consumingly screened. To the north, events are moving so rapidly that reinforcing units are hard-pressed to keep pace with the UN advance. On October 9th, Kaesong is taken. This surrender frees the last South Korean city held by the Reds. Then on the east coast, Wonsan. Just 2 days after the fall of Kaesong, ROK 3rd Division troops seized the port of Wonsan, having marched 287 miles in 20 days to get there. They met little resistance. Next, the Red capital itself. On October 17th, men of the 1st Cavalry Division worked their way into the outskirts of Pyongyang. In less than 24 hours, the North Korean capital is in United Nations hands.
These were important victories. Incheon, Seoul, Pyongyang.
Very important indeed. You know, complete victory seemed just around the corner.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, if you don't mind, I'd like to quote a phrase you wrote right after the fall of Pyongyang. Now that the Korean War is evidently drawing to an end.
Well, that does read a little silly now, doesn't it, considering what happened for the next 3 years? But you got to remember that that was before the Chinese communists hit us. And everybody, the highest military brass, the GI on the line, the reporters, all thought that the North Korean army had been smashed so thoroughly that the mopping up process would take only a few weeks.
Psychological warfare plays an important role at this stage of the fighting. Using high-powered speakers, Psy-War planes fly ahead of advancing UN troops, booming their message in Korean to the retreating enemy. Safe conduct passes prove highly effective. More than once, whole enemy companies lay down their weapons and wait for our troops to arrive. Two days after Pyongyang falls, our first combat airdrop in Korea gets underway in an attempt to cut off retreating Red forces north of Pyongyang. As at Incheon, the Supreme Commander personally supervises the operation. Nearly 2,000 troops making the jump. In a second wave, the heavy equipment arrives, Air Express. Local transportation is pressed into service. Next day, 1,800 reinforcements jump, but the enemy has already fled northward. In the east, ROK forces continue their headlong charge north from Wonsan to take Hungnam. Meantime, a Navy task force is waiting off Wonsan. 3,000 enemy mines had to be cleared from beach approaches before the Marine Force could come ashore.
It was a delay, but we could afford it. The ROKs had made us a welcome present, a beach with no enemy guns on it. The whole division came ashore with nothing worse than a few wet feet.
The mission now is to press this advantage, continue the attack toward the Yalu. Swiftly, the Marine Force moves in on Red-held villages and towns. And just as swiftly, out the other side. Spirits are high. 3 days later, and more than 100 miles closer to the Yalu, the 7th Division makes its landing at Iwan. Ships of every description swarm into shallow water to disgorge 7,000 men and their machines. Their only opposition, the deep, loose sand of Iwan's beaches. This far north, winter comes early to Korea. Cold weather uniforms are welcome as the division moves out to rejoin the attack. To the west, Marines are advancing over ground frozen harder every day. News of their approach runs ahead of them as village after village is liberated. North Koreans meet freely, and the Christians among them pray openly for the first time since 1945. The shattered communist forces are pulling back into the last corner of this peninsula they had set out to conquer. UN troops follow as fast as the tortuous terrain and increasing cold will allow. In the eastern sector, it is difficult even to keep contact with the retreating enemy. In the central sector, however, prisoners taken during a strong Red counterattack give warning of potential danger. Many of them wear the quilted uniform of Communist China. Meantime, in the northern sea of Japan, winter is giving our offshore forces a taste of things to come. Even routine supply operations are becoming a nightmare of icy wind and pitching decks.
We kept our aircraft warmed and ready to take off the minute the weather lifted. But meantime, the Reds would have a lot less trouble moving troops and supplies on Korean roads. We didn't like that thought much.
Ashore, the Chinese forces have pulled back, leaving a clear road to the Yalu. The village of Haisanjin huddles against the banks of the Yalu across from Manchuria. Here, men of the 7th Division set up their outposts. It seems a sorry spot to spend Thanksgiving Eve. But from bases in the south, cargo planes are already taking off, setting courses northward across the frozen miles. They carry crates rigged for airdrop and labeled perishable rush. Turkey and the trimmings, courtesy of the U.S. Air Force. All over Korea, mess kits overflow with steaming potatoes, giblet gravy, cranberry sauce, the works. Along the Yalu, everything is quiet. Every man, no matter what his duty for the day, shares in the traditional feast of gratitude. Headquarters feel certain that one more UN offensive will end the fighting in Korea. Actually, a whole new war is ready to begin. Across the Yalu, the decision has been made. Full-scale Chinese intervention is about to bring the second phase of the Korean conflict to an end.
And that threat of Chinese intervention, no one foresaw back at the time of the fall of Pyongyang.
Well, the point is that it had been pretty well discounted by then. I think many of us, most of us, felt that the Chinese would hit us when we came in Incheon, or never. And I remember the briefing going up on the troop ship was that this was either the last inning of the ball game or the first inning of a doubleheader.
Bill, I'd like to read from one other story you filed in Korea. Wars are so big and so violent and move so quickly that the individuals on the team often become necessarily anonymous, almost faceless.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you went on in this story and in others to give dozens of those faceless men a voice, to describe their jobs and their attitudes, to report what they were thinking and even what they were hoping.
Well, that's right. That, I think, is an important job of war reporting, to chronicle the attitude of the individual. It may even be more important than writing about the amount of ground that was won or lost on a given day. Wars have become so big that the headlines usually can reflect only what the team as a whole did. But behind every success, every defeat, there are dozens, hundreds, perhaps thousands of men whose individual attitudes have everything in the world to do with shaping that particular success or that particular defeat. Now, these victories we've been talking about today were terribly important in their day. And they were achieved simply because a lot of individuals did their jobs bravely and conscientiously. It's always been that way.
Do you think that could be true today?
Of course. No reason why it shouldn't be as true today as it was in Korea or in World War II or the American Revolution, for that matter, although I must admit that's one war I didn't cover. Our weapons have changed, but I've yet to hear of a weapon that fires itself. And so the individual soldier or sailor or airman remains the single indispensable factor of war.
Bill Lawrence, thanks very much for being with us today. Now, this is Sergeant Stuart Queen, your host for The Big Picture, inviting you to watch for our next episode in The Big Picture, which will deal with the last chapter of the Korean War. And we'll have as our guest the noted military critic and author, Brigadier General S.L.A. Marshall.
The Big Picture is an official report for the armed forces and the American people. Produced by the Army Pictorial Center. Presented by the Department of the Army in cooperation with this station.